This is Wes at Bad Seed Games, and we're going to be picking up where we left off in Chapter 4. We had set up all of the systems. Now this is going to be part 1 of the Post-Mortem system, where I go back and I adjust information that I have learned since I recently put these tutorials together, or refining other things. Basically making them a lot more leaner, smoother, or updating them. Alright, so before we'd finished off with the event system where if you enter it, it will focus the camera, but there is one thing that I have noticed, and that it's the use of the trigger enter system events. Now before I had them set up in a rather redundant way where it would basically trigger the event and trigger the trigger event, but I've recently learned that with the trigger event as a system event, you don't necessarily need to use the trigger event per se. And I'm going to show you on how to refine it. Now, for starters, let's start with the camera trigger. Now, let's just disable that for now. And I'll show you what I mean. So whenever it enters in, you'll see that it will still trigger, even with the trigger event disabled. As you see, as it's just clicked over. Now granted, it's not actually doing anything right now because the information that I'm extracting from the trigger event is no longer being extracted, so the rest of the finite state machine doesn't know what to do. So let's go ahead and address that. So since we are using the trigger enter, the next action we're going to be using is get trigger info. Now let's put it, since this is triggering, let's go into the next action that is going in, that does the test, and add the get trigger info. Put it at the top, and the game object that we're hitting, in this particular case, it was the trigger. So let's make sure that that matches, like so. Now let's see what happens. And it is behaving like it was before, since it is now able to extract the information that it needs. It can then continue on. Alright, so this trigger enter, since it's a system event, like I said, this is a learning process for me as well. So let's go ahead and modify the rest of the systems. Now if you remember the teleporter, it just goes straight in here, so we're going to need to add in a new state. Let's call this trigger filter. Let's add that get trigger info, and let's put in a game object compare tag. So the object that we're going to be hitting is the player. Let's tell it to check the player if it is a player tagged item. And I'm going to add in two options here. Now I've added two custom events called continue and return, and since they are custom events made by me, the system doesn't have any hard-coded predefined behavior to add to them. Oops. So let's set them up. So transition event continue and transition event return. So if it succeeds, we want it to continue. If it doesn't, we'll return. Alright, so the game object compare tag, if the player is true, if it receives a true value, which means that it is a player tagged object, let's tell it to continue, and if not, return. So I'm just going to highlight this whole action, copy it, let's disable that for now, let's paste that into the receiving, or the other teleport pad, and do the same here. Alright, so let's give it a quick test and see how that goes. Alright, let's look at teleporter 1 since that's the first one we're going to hit. And as you can see, it is still behaving accordingly. Now let's disable this get trigger info, and actually no, if we do that, that won't actually do anything, because it'll just hover in here because it won't know what to do. Alright, so let's go ahead and to the boss fight and do the same thing. So paste state, and I'm going to have to copy it again. Copy state into the boss fight, since that also uses a trigger. Paste the state, go in here, continue, or return. Now instead of, we are working with the player on this one, so we can leave that as is. So let's give it a quick little test. Teleport over, and it's behaving like it did before. Alright, so this is pretty much it for this particular post-mortem, clarifying the trigger enter system events. This is something, like I said, I've learned myself, so I've learned that the hard-coded system events may have some behavior already attached to them. So be advised to that. If you want an event that is completely devoid of any pre-programmed behavior, your best bet is to create it in here. So I hope that's answered a few questions, and that's hopefully helped refine your own systems just a little bit, and also given you a bit more knowledge. But other than that, if you like this video, or if you like what I'm doing, feel free to comment and rate it however you like. And if you'd like to subscribe, that'd be cool too. Other than that, I hope you have a great one, and I'll catch you later.